We have item 1.1. Any members having any conflict of interest or pecuniary interest declare before we start? I see none, so we'll proceed. We have the agenda here, and there's one late addition. 12.3 is in closed session matter, legal matter regarding the AUC decision that we just received. I'd entertain a motion to adopt the amended agenda. Councillor Pauls, all in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. And we have item 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of September the 4th, 2018. Councillor Chapman,
thank you, Worship.
your mic. You wouldn't mind, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. I will move to accept the minutes as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman to accept as presented. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. And we have Spencer presenting on 4.1, is that right?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon to Mayor and members of Council. It's been several months since the initiation of the Gateways and Corridors Strategic Plan, and I'm happy to, or pleased to bring it forward to Council at this time in its current state, which is as a working draft. Really, the purpose of presenting it at this point is to make sure that we're on the right path at a staff level, and to consider a couple of items within the plan itself and the plan process. So just very quickly, as Council remembers, this process of developing this plan started last December with a community workshop, and it's taken several months and several rounds of engagement with the community to get to the point we're at today. So without further ado, I'll just jump in and provide a quick overview of the plan itself. It's separated into 4 major categories. One of which, of course, is introduction. It then reviews the what aspects of engagement we've brought forward into the plan. It provides universal guidelines, which is generally a set of best practices for the maintenance and upkeep and enhancement of the gateways and corridors in general. And it ends with site-specific strategies, which breaks certain areas down into more detail. So we do have, beyond the general elements of the plan, which are captured in the first 8 or 9 pages, we do have a proposal at the staff level for the first actual project that would come out of this plan. And I'm not sure how Council's seeing it on your screens, but I'm imagining you have page numbers available on the document. So if we go to page 25, just going to make sure I'm on the right page as well. Okay, so if we start on page 24, actually, we've used this layout for pretty much all of the specific areas that we've identified through the engagement and at the staff level as a format that we can use to undertake more detailed designs. So we identify the area, we show some of the infrastructure that's within the area, and then from there we move on to detailed design elements as based on the feedback and best practices that we've identified at the staff level. So if we go on to page 25, the first proposal from this plan would be the development of enhancements in what we've been calling the McCain Park space through the introduction of some berms for sound attenuation and visual separation between the highway and the homes that front onto 19th, with some additional plantings and a functional rain garden as well, which would functionally increase the storm capacity in that area. Beyond the actual design itself, one thing that we've come up with for this plan is on page 29, and it's essentially what we're calling project sheets. So it outlines the description of the project itself, how it ties into the values and the value-added elements that are tied to the strategic plan. It provides a brief timeline for construction and then a general cost estimate and an opportunity for project partners to be listed as well. So the idea here is that the development of designs for each specific space will take some time over this winter, but we'll have a project sheet with each design that will allow for a fairly quick decision from council on a year-over-year basis in terms of where the money is being spent and which areas might be considered priorities. And the only other thing I'll mention before taking any questions is that this is the work of staff, but it's very much the work of a planning student that we've had working with us from the University of Lethbridge, Josh Radford. So a lot of the credit for the plan and the details goes to him for putting together the culmination of the work that the community and staff has put into the project. Yes, sir.
Chapman?
Thank you, Worship, through to Spencer. Thank you so much for this report and your process for moving things forward. Short question is just on the McCain Parks, just as an example. You're predicting that you're expecting that it would cost up to $47,000. Is that correct for that one project?
Yes, that's correct.
Will that just include just that area, or will it include any other fences that will be moved further to the west, or is that just the one project there?
No, that would just be for that one project. If I may elaborate a little bit, there's going to be a cost to increasing the functionality of certain areas. In this case, it's introducing the rain garden and tying that into the storm system. But it is a functional element, and certain things, of course, can be added in or taken out as we go along. One of the reasons it wasn't extended too far west is because we've confirmed with Alberta Transportation, who's been excellent to work with on this project, that they, at some point, would like to extend their right-of-way west of that, so that we may have an opportunity to work with them on a separate plan or a separate element of the plan to the west. So we didn't want to include too much in this one at this point in time.
Thank you very much.
That's really timely. Those of us that were at the Roger Brooks presentation last week, this really highlights the importance of a sound gateways and corridors strategy in that. And so it's exciting. I like the first step. Can you tell me if there was any engagement with McCain at this point in what we've developed?
We've been in touch, and we're playing the cliched game of phone tag. So we're still trying to get in touch directly. But
any other questions through to Spencer? Councillor Lloyd?
Have you got any plans or any outlines or anything for the signs, entrance signs?
yes, through the chair, that would be one of the plans that comes out of the universal guidelines section of the plan that talks about better and more signage. So from my perspective, it's likely more appropriate to have a separate document outlining exactly how wayfinding signage is going to be planned out, and that's in the works currently.
So then, reading your report, I take it, you're wanting a couple of decisions. You want a decision regarding the public engagement process, and you want endorsement of the first project. Is that what you would like to receive today? Yeah.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And in reading your report, I support the idea of having the public engagement in advance to the different rollouts. And, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. Okay, Councillor Lloyd? Well,
I think that's a great place to start. That's been a thorn in our side for so long. I think that's a great way to start. It's good.
so is that your motion to?
I'll make the motion, sure.
To support the first project, the McCain Park? Okay. All right, we have a motion by Councillor Lloyd, and Councillor Paul, you got your hand up. Yes.
I was going to make a motion.
Okay, Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just looking at and speaking in favor of it. If we, in the future, extend 13th Street into the industrial park, will this be impacted at all? Are we putting money ahead of something that in the next year or two we could be looking at wrecking what we're putting into this?
If I may, in terms of the work to be done in McCain Park,
Yes.
I don't believe so. There may be some alterations that would have to be made on the far east side of that footprint.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so is there any discussion relative to Councillor Lloyd's motion to proceed with the first project, namely the McCain Park? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That was carried unanimously. And then with regard to the public endorsement, Spencer was looking for a motion on how to direct that. And the one option was to engage the public as we embark on the different project phases. Councillor Chapman?
Through to Spencer, then, what you're looking for public engagement, basically just sort of an open house concept. This is this plan moving forward. You're not looking for choices or for certain options or anything like that?
If I may, through the chair, in a sense, I think what I had outlined for the recommendations section of the report was recognizing there's been a significant amount of engagement up to this point, that we engage on individual projects moving forward instead of on the plan overall. So it would be 2C in your package is what I believe the discussion was centering around at this point.
That's right.
I'll make a motion to support 2C as worded.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. All right. And you want to stay there for 4.2, I suspect? Okay. All right. The floor is again yours, sir.
If I may, I'm going to invite Terry May to join me as well.
Okay.
This has been a joint project between planning and operations. Well, thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council. This, again, is something that's come up from early in 2018. So with the street lighting matter that came up in February of 2018, there was discussion regarding double check in terms of where the dark spots are in Coaldale and checking that information against what the community has to say about this. So a large part of this staff report is the summary of the survey findings that we collected on the matter. And then we do have a set of options that council may wish to consider moving forward if there's a decision to be made on how to address the dark spots in Coaldale. So just for background, we did receive a design and quote for about a third of the dark spot areas in town late last year. And I'm sure council remembers the fee for that was $298,000 for 27 new lights, 10 of which would be mounted on existing poles and 17 of which would be entirely new infrastructure. A number of questions were asked at that time that matter came before council. So I'll just go through the list of questions that we'd like to address today. The first was determining whether a company other than Fortis can undertake the work on street lighting infrastructure. So mostly through Terry's hard work and a lot of discussions with Fortis, we've determined that indeed third-party contractors can undertake the work instead of Fortis. However, if we look at page 2 of the staff report, we have 6 major bullet points that we'll just go through briefly that would be worth consideration if there is a desire to explore a third-party contractor doing some of the work. So first and foremost, only Fortis-approved contractors can undertake work on Fortis infrastructure. And they regularly maintain and update a roster of contractors who can do hydrovacing and placement of posts and some of the underground work and whatnot. So they do have lists for each region in the province of the contractors that they've approved to do that work. Approved contractors are not permitted to undertake work on existing poles, which would preclude a contractor from attaching the 10 arms or arm lights to existing poles as per the initial quote that we received. Contractors would also not be permitted to tie into existing infrastructure, as Fortis does not allow contractors to undertake that type of work. Any plans and designs prepared by a third-party engineering or design firm would have to be submitted and approved by Fortis. And approved contractors would be able to procure and install poles, bases, conduit, and wire, except for tie-ins. All fixtures would be provided by Fortis. And lastly, even though third-party contractors are able to install the above-noted items, Fortis may still install portions of the materials based on discussion and agreement between Fortis and the contractors. So those are just some considerations around the topic of whether to use Fortis or a third-party contractor. In terms of community engagement, as I've already alluded to, we had 111 responses. Let me see here. I believe we had 103 on online forms, and then about 8 or 9 on paper forms. So we did have a fair number of responses in that regard, and I have a whole bunch of maps attached to the report that basically summarize, the way I could summarize that is that the feedback from the community supports the technical information that the town had put together prior to that. One point of note, which I'll address a little bit later on, was the desire for pathway lighting that the survey highlighted, and we'll touch on that in a moment. So moving forward from the idea that we have the right information, the community's confirmed that we do indeed have dark spots where we think we do. The staff has outlined a couple of different approaches that could be taken to dealing with those dark spots. The first of which we've termed work from the darkest areas backwards. Basically go from the areas that need the light the most to the areas that maybe don't need it quite as much. One of the issues there is that there's not really one specific area that has the most dark spots. In that sense, it's more the general concept that there is dark areas in town. So that may be difficult to be too specific with that one. The second approach could be to work on areas that have already been designed. So we have about a third of the community designed already, as per the attachments in the staff report. And then the third option would be to obtain a design for all dark spots, and then move forward on all of the areas at once. Of course, there's a fourth approach, which we're calling a hybrid, which could be any number of variations of the first three. So in terms of public engagement, as noted, one of the findings that we found of note was the desire for pathway lighting. If we go through Fortis for that type of lighting, it's about $3,000 to $6,000 per fixture, depending on the type of fixture, and that's not including civil costs to install. There, of course, is another option where we could go with solar lighting. We don't have hard numbers on that yet, but we are collecting those numbers just for a broader perspective on the pathway lighting. And so we'll come back to council at a later date with the pathway lighting more comprehensively informed. So at this time, we're open to any questions that council may have.
Jutman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and again, thank you to both of you for this very elaborate report. I guess my one question would be is about the capacity of Fortis, and from what I've understood in times past is that there seemed to be a capacity issue with replacing existing lights from what we had before to the current LED lights. So having said that, then we're coming up to today, and you know, September's here. The days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer, and so by the sounds of things, we could go through another winter without getting any work done, unless we go to an idea of this hybrid model that could work if we were able to get a project approved through a hybrid idea. What would be your thoughts on that?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll start, and then I'll probably pass the question on to Terry to finish up. But at a high level, we don't know the exact availability of Fortis as of today. There's always some delay. And in speaking with them last week, just to clarify a couple of things, they mentioned that if they don't have time, they sometimes, at the request of the client, which would be the town in this case, can opt to download some of the work onto their approved contractors without having to go the other route, which would be for us to get designs confirmed and then go with a contractor through an RFP process. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Terry?
Just not to speak for Fortis, but it is late in the year already, so that would have to be considered if we wanted to start a big project at this point.
Go ahead.
Further to my previous question, the pathway lighting certainly rings highly with me, and I support the concept and the idea. I guess I'm kind of stuck on that thought because if we do it ourselves, then we bear the responsibility of maintenance and replacement, and on it goes. Yet, if we were to have Fortis install that lighting, then it would be part of their overall program in Coaldale. Would that be right?
That's correct, yes.
Kaylin, did you have a comment?
Just a question through to Terry and Spencer. When looking at the amount of administrative time required, which option is less burden, option 1 or option 2? Like, with what methodology is less administrative time and more efficient that way?
Through the chair to the CAO, I think just by virtue of the fact that there already are so many other steps accounted for with Fortis doing the work from start to finish, I think in terms of the time it would take town administration to oversee the third-party option from design to completion would be significantly more than going with Fortis for the whole process.
Councillor Simpson.
I support actually going with Fortis because I think we're gonna kind of like skip some steps that, you know, that you guys don't have to do, and that, you know, it can get delayed while waiting on the other one for. So I think we need to address these dark spots sooner. So I would make a motion to start on the area that's already being designed, with Fortis doing the work.
So that would be approach number 2, right? I believe that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So Councillor Simpson moves staff recommendation number 2 with Fortis being the contractor, provider of the service.
Recommendation number 1.
No.
1B.
Or-
1B. 2 is
Okay, well, whatever, I had it differently in my, okay. So the recommendation is to go with the existing plan that Fortis has already done, and with them to provide it, right?
And then within that time, start designing the other ones so that it can kind of be a consistent thing.
Okay. So it's, sorry for that confusion, but I think, does anybody have any confusion after that? Okay, so we're clear. Okay, any discussion?
One quick question on that. If it's going to be solely Fortis, I'm just a little concerned about, you know, timelines and whether they can, you know, address things as presented, you know, on the basis of what we're looking for. I'm just concerned about their ability to do that, just from my understanding from previous times about their capacity issues. So that's my point. My other point would be, if we're going to go ahead with Fortis, I'd certainly like to have the arena added into that as soon as possible. I think we're receiving in an area. I'm just going outside of this for a moment because the arena seems to be the most used spot and the darkest spot that's going to be used from here on till next spring.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Simpson. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? So then with that, I guess the correspondence from us to Fortis would be to express the ideology that we like them to commence sooner rather than later on that, right?
Yes, of course. We'll get the quotation that we do have signed up, and then we'll have a conversation with them right away and pass that along.
And then, so then with regard, do you need a motion to direct anything regarding the pathway lighting, or your report seemed to indicate that you were going to keep proceeding with finding out options and that, and come back with that?
Yes, we'll update council as soon as we have hard numbers on the pathway lighting.
All right. Good. All right. So that deals with that. Thank you very much. Then we have 4.3. You're really getting your fair share of the workload today.
Thankfully, this is my last item for the afternoon. So, thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Council. This report is a procedural follow-up to Council Motion 298.17 made on July 10th of 2017, which focused specifically on the timing of the extension of 13th Street. I'd like to make clear right away that this report is not a request to approve 13th Street, but rather a request for any further decisions with respect to the matter to be tabled until after the completion of the Transportation Master Plan. So with that being said, as mentioned, this focuses on motion 298.17, and I'd like to direct council to the bolded phrases in that motion specifically, the first of which indicates that roadwork is to be completed on or before October 1st, 2018, and that roadwork references the extension of 13th Street. Further, it's indicated here that if the extension of 13th Street is not completed by October 1, 2018, administration is instructed to bring an amending bylaw back to council for reconsideration of how to proceed with the gate. And the gate in this case is the gate that's been installed just off of 8th Avenue on the east side of the Seasons community. So what I would like to suggest at this time, Mr. Mayor, is that in light of the timing of the Transportation Master Plan and the information that that will provide for the pros and cons of the extension of 13th Street, I would suggest at this time it's preferable to defer any decisions around the council table until further discussion about, or until further information from the Transportation Master Plan is available in January of 2019. Sorry. I do have an amending bylaw prepared as per the motion made by council last year, but again, my recommendation at this time is to defer any further decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, you're asking to either to defer or to rescind.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I was just drawing a clarity between the fact that if we amended the ASP as it was previously amended, you could also just rescind the bylaw. What I'm asking at this time, we're recommending, is that we defer any further decisions until January 2019.
Councillor Lloyd? Please,
All right, go ahead, make the motion.
okay, you're supporting the recommendation that council defer any further decisions regarding either amending the Seasons Area Structure Plan or rescinding bylaw 731-P-06-17 or continuing with the extension of 13th Street until after the Transportation Master Plan is complete, and that a letter updating the community be sent to the Seasons, 30th Avenue area, and 13th Street area landowners. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
You can have a break now. Okay. And Kaylin, you're going to introduce 4.4, is that correct?
That's correct. What we have here is the proposed terms of reference for the newly merged Public Safety Committee and Police Advisory Committee to become what is called, or proposed to be called, the Community Safety Advisory Committee. And looking at the terms of reference, we took elements from both the Public Safety Committee, which is previously an internal working committee composed of members of council and staff, but no community representation, along with elements from the Police Advisory Committee, which included 5 representatives from the citizen plus 2 councillors and admin, and merged them together. So you'll see some similarities taken from each of those terms of reference placed into this one. The main theme, if you look at the composition, is this is a more of a roll up the sleeves, a little bit more hands-on, on-field working committee. We have divided the community into 3 districts as it relates to patrols for peace officers. So the idea is that we want a broad representation or a representative sample of citizens from the community on this committee, because the idea is you're going to understand the insights of the area you live better than most people. So we want to get representation from the industrial park, a citizen from each of the districts in Coaldale, and there's 3, as well as a citizen at large where, you know, it's not so much boundaries, but someone who lives here. And the idea is that they're going to have insight on what goes on in their community, do some ride-alongs with our peace officers, share some of the intel that they gather. You know, what are some jaywalking patterns, for example? That's really useful intel for our CPOs to know, so that we can look at perhaps some engineering controls or solutions, like maybe if you create or recommend to put flashing lights or raise crosswalks in an area, that might help enhance the safety. So we really want to extract the on-field insight from the residents that live here so that we can see what's going on in all corners of the community. The other element that involves a little bit of field work, and this I think sounds fun, should be fun, is that the citizens in our Safe Routes to School program could join our peace officers on bike, put on a vest, and really be that community advocate for the designated safe routes to and from school. To me, that's a little bit funner than sitting around a table, you know, talking. Like, that's the doing part. So we want to make this as interactive as possible. So that's the other item that I'll mention relative to what people can expect to be doing on this committee. We think it'll be fun, and I think the insights will be really helpful for our peace officers and our Deputy Chief of Public Safety. And the idea is that the feedback received from that forum will be brought back to council. We do have money through the photo radar program that's set aside for a safety infrastructure reserve, so we anticipate making a little bit more requests to council, some recommendations on how to reinvest that money in the community, using this as one of our intel organizations.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple things. I noticed that this is really focused towards our peace officer program, not so much the RCMP. Are we trying to avoid the reporting of the RCMP with the way we've set up this committee? And then the second question is, I seem to miss Schedule A in the report to see what the regions would be for setting up the citizens on the committee.
Kalen, you want to have a response for?
That's an excellent question. The staff sergeant sat in on the steering, or the staff level, on the composition of the draft. The idea is that the staff sergeant would still make quarterly reports to council, but some of the information that they're mandated to provide to council is separate from the reporting mechanisms from this committee. So the idea would be that he would still come to council, but it would be a separate report from the report of this committee.
So I'm confused then, because this was set up through the Sol Gen, and now we're taking a step back. I'm just confused at where we're going with it, Kalen. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but I'm just confused that we may be letting our staff sergeant direct what committee was set up through the Sol Gen for a reporting mechanism to our citizens, and of starting to sidestep that.
In terms of the staff sergeant and the RCMP presence, that's going to maintain with this committee, like we were having with the Police Advisory Committee, the same type of information. What we looked at as staff are what are some more creative ways that we can hear from citizens to get that eyes and ears in the community. So the staff sergeant along with our CPOs will be hearing the same type of eyes and ears intel from the citizens. We just provided them with more of a hands-on approach to gather that information. getting ride-alongs with the RCMP is a little bit more complicated than, say, with our peace officers. If that helps a little bit.
Councillor Chapman, I guess, and then Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm speaking in favor of the plan, move forward with this. I just have a question about the composition as well, and I studied this, and under 5B, which would be on page 6, you talk about the Deputy Chief of Public Safety. I didn't find that anywhere in your composition of board members. Would you be able to explain how that position would fill?
That's actually a really good catch. The Director of Emergency Management and the Deputy Chief of Public Safety are the same individual. It would be a staff resource person, but the terminology of the position, they should be consistent. So under 5, the Director of Emergency Management is listed, but that should actually say Deputy Chief of Public Safety to be consistent.
Okay. Just reflecting on Councillor Avery's questions. So this really is just replacing the PAC with another model similar, but includes the emergency management component to it.
The public safety and peace officer component.
Councillor Simpson.
So a little bit on to Councillor Avery's discussion. Part of it with the Police Advisory Committee, I believe, is we were looking for more statistics, more, what's going on in the community and stuff, and information like that from the RCMP. And I was under the belief some of this was going to be more part of this committee too, when we first assigned that they should go together.
Would it be helpful, like, hearing the feedback, because this is, draft 1 and it's basically a blank canvas, if there was the statistical reporting component built in?
I think we do need to hear something from the RCMP with the statistical crime going on within our community, and that's something where you have those 5 pillars of people from within the community that they can help with that too. Say, we feel like, okay, we got the stats from the RCMP on this, but we're missing this and we're missing that. This is what we're seeing that's going on in our community. So I think that's a vital thing to have, is the stats.
Okay, Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, so this is really making our peace officers accountable. It's giving them ride-alongs, but it's doing nothing for our partnership with the RCMP in the way the terms of reference. When I read it, and I read it a couple times, I just couldn't see where it's making and bringing anything back to this committee from the RCMP, except for in an advisory capacity to our peace officers. It's good that we know what our peace officers are doing, but when we're having a bunch of break-ins in a community, it's not, people want to hear more about that than they do about Jason was jaywalking on down Main Street.
Go ahead.
So if I could just look for some recommendations, if we added a section on statistical reporting from the peace officers and the RCMP. Is there any other bullet points while we're at the discussion here that we could add to round that out to get a little bit more of that RCMP policing flair to it? Because the RCMP will be present at these meetings, hearing the same insights, and some of the insights that people might have might be criminal code material, which would trigger the RCMP and not the peace officer. So they will be at the forum, but in terms of what information might be helpful for the citizen members as well as the councillors, we can add a statistical reporting component for the RCMP. Are there any other elements for the RCMP involvement that we should look at adding in addition to that in the terms here?
I'd say, like Councillor Avery pointed out, we do have the PAC, and I wouldn't might be helpful to compare the roles and responsibilities of the PAC to see if there's bullet points within the PAC roles and responsibilities that should be folded into here. And like you say, this is just I think we're in agreement with the philosophy, the idea and the composition and whatnot. And I think we could we can go ahead and do the community appointment announcements and, like recruit members and whatnot based on it, but maybe bring back a draft to the next meeting that would maybe reflect just a little bit more of the weaving in of the roles and responsibilities of PAT, so it's clear that we're not trying to lose sight of that part of the public safety conversation. And and I think also to keep the thread going is that we want to maintain a good reporting stats from the CPO program as well too. Like it's not just the RCMP stats that are good to know, it's also what the CPO program is getting. And then I'll see Councillor Chapman over there with a question, but I just had a question on 5.B on the composition, and my concern is I don't want 2 members of council to be in the top spots kind of thing. Like it's sort of the way it's worded might lend itself to accidentally having 2 members of council in the vice and the chair position. And I prefer if I would really like a citizen to at least be in one of those spots. So I thought that if the wording might be if the committee so elects, either the chair or vice chair seats can be elected, but both cannot be a member. A member of council cannot occupy both positions or something along that way. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And speaking in favor also of the composition, I just reading through this, I don't find that the RCMP would be weighted any heavier than our CPOs. I think having the Director of Emergency Management is a great complement to that whole committee. So I don't see anyone outdoing the other in terms of numbers. I guess my one question would be is further to member terms on 6.0. I like the where you're going with this, although I do have a question about the 1-year appointment. So if you're talking about a 1-year appointment being 1 term, and so 1 year is equal to 1 term, and the maximum anybody can be on that committee will be 4 terms, so that would equal to 4 years. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
And to that point, one of the reasons that we recommended a 1-year term is that there's 3 years left in the term. So to do a 2-year appointment, you only got 1 year left. To do a 3-year appointment, no one else gets a turn. So this way, it gives everybody an opportunity to be a part of it, as well as at the citizen level.
So then, go ahead, then, Councillor Chapman. Okay, go ahead up here.
With all that, then I'll make a motion that Council approves the proposed terms of reference as, I guess we can call it amended, so it just references the mayor's thoughts on the chairs and vice chairs. That'd be the composition of the board, or.
Councillor Simpson?
Can we hold off? Can we make it, instead of maybe have it so we can appoint these people within the next, but we still have quite a few little things to figure out with all that. So I would rather not approve the terms of reference until we have it all fully approved. If that makes sense to you.
Is there anything?
I was more requesting that the administration take a step back and look at the roles or responsibilities of the PAC committee, and then weave any salient points into this roles and responsibilities. So I think that would really require administration to bring back another crack at this at our next meeting with the revisions that would reflect sort of the concerns of not losing sight of the RCMP component of the Public Safety Committee.
Okay, that isn't referenced in here anywhere, but
No.
I can withdraw the motion
Okay.
and just have administration bring back updated terms of reference, which would come from the research on the PAC committee.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussion then? All in favor? Just to bring it back to. And then if members of council have any subsequent thoughts or whatnot subsequent to the meeting, I think it would be appropriate to email Kaylin if you had a epiphany on some role or responsibility that should be included. Okay, that's good. And then we have the new business 7.1. We have a staff report in there for the Gemini West wine and cheese auction, and the question if council wanted to consider a table purchase or not. Councilor Lloyd?
Worship, I will make a motion that we sponsor a table at the wine and cheese auction.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. And then we have 7.2, Michelle.
So presented before you is the July bank reconciliation showing where we are with the finances. We're in good shape as being halfway through the year, and hopefully from there we'll just go down slowly, but not too far before the end of the year.
Hey, any questions for Michelle on their bank reconciliation? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the preliminary bank reconciliation for the month of July 2018. Councilor Avery makes that motion. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Thank you, Michelle. And then 7.3, logistics for the upcoming public hearing and council meeting on October 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item's being presented more for information. We had a decision to make with respect to the upcoming council meeting. We have a meeting scheduled for October 9th, and we've had some public input sessions with respect to most specifically the issue of cannabis with respect to the land use bylaw and the amendments to the land use bylaw that are forthcoming. In order to handle the retail sale of cannabis, we had an open house. What date was that? The 20th? Last Thursday? Or 2 Thursdays ago? Where we had the opportunity to present that to the public and receive some feedback. And that feedback's been consolidated at this point. So we have an open house scheduled for the 9th. And unfortunately, due to the restrictions with respect to how we advertise, the timing of when the newspaper comes out relative to council meetings, we had to make a decision in advance of this council meeting with respect to whether we would hold that meeting here, whether we would move it over to the hub to accommodate potentially a larger crowd. We basically take up half of our audience space, sort of at the most standard of meetings, so we don't have a lot of space, as you can see. So we did opt to move to the hub in the event that we have a large turnout. We may or may not. It's never possible to know well in advance of these meetings what the turnout will be, but we'll have the opportunity to accommodate more people at the hub if they should choose to come out to that public hearing and have their voice heard. The difficulty with that is that with our live streaming system that we have in place for these meetings, we don't have the technological capacity to do that at the hub. We're still looking into potentially recording the hearing, potentially putting in place an opportunity to post it online at a later date. In order to do that, we want to make sure that we can do it at a reasonably high quality level, and also that the technology doesn't get in the way of the sort of efficient running of the meeting. So we're going to do what we can to accommodate that, but at this point, what we're moving forward with is to move the council meeting to the hub for that October 9th meeting without the ability to broadcast the meeting.
Thank you, Cam. I think it's important to have that well stated that, you know, the live streaming won't be available, and it's important to have that transparency. I don't think there's anything necessary. So it's just receive this report for information is all that's required. Councillor Simpson moves this report for information. All in favor? Okay. All right, and then Andrea. Go ahead, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. I just wanted to give you an update on the Transportation Master Plan. Spencer has kind of talked about it already, so I'll be quite brief. As you know, back in May, we set out the request for proposal. It went on the Alberta Purchasing Connection site, the APC site. It closed 3 weeks later in June. And so as a town staff, we reviewed and scored. There were 6 submissions. And then we picked the top 3 favorites, and they actually came in and did presentations that we scored as well. So from that, Peter A. Trush, I apologize, I might have mispronounced his last name, but he was a successful candidate at a total cost of $58,100. So we had our first startup meeting the 3rd week in August, and the plan itself will be done probably middle of January of 2019. So just for a little bit of information with council then, Peter is hoping to do a workshop with council at our next council meeting on October 9th. He's looking to have a 2-hour workshop if possible. There'll be a kind of a formal presentation at the beginning of it to explain how this plan is and how it integrates with our municipal development plan that Spencer will be working on. And then there'll be some open informal conversations and just kind of question and answers. So please feel free to come prepared with some questions or feedback that you're hearing from the community, trouble areas, things of that nature. Yeah, and then to continue on the public engagement side, we're hoping that on October 10th then we could pair it together with some public engagement and do our first session then. And then the week of November 26th, we'd like to do a second council session and take some of the feedback that we've received and kind of come with a bit of a draft plan. We'd like to pair that again with another public engagement session and even going into the schools and doing some public engagement with the 2 school divisions. And then our final engagement session would be the first week in January with the final report in the middle of January.
So Andrea, with regard to what we're doing, can you maybe touch on a couple of things? Number one, what was the objective of the Transportation Master Plan? How was that put out there, that the company doing it? Were they given any parameters, or were they to just kind of look at Coaldale as a whole and come up with their own thoughts and ideas and recommendations based on best practices relative to changes in our transportation corridors and whatnot in Coaldale? And secondly, what kind of competency does this the winning person have to carry on the work that you envision?
If I may, Mr. Mayor. So it was a bit of both, to be honest. We did provide a scope for them, looking at the existing town as it is and including our annexation areas. You know, we as you know, we've gained a lot of area as of August 1st, so we wanted to look into that and start planning what kind of road networks do we need, you know, what are we envisioning then for these new areas. So we gave them about six different guidelines that they needed to work within, and then we want them to use their professional opinion on taking the hot spots and kind of problem areas that we know of, and then, you know, they take their look and see how we need to proceed in the best way forward. Yeah, and then as for Peter Trush, his background, he has been with quite a few different companies and even was with the City of Edmonton as their main transportation engineer. So he's done a lot of transportation master plans in smaller communities like ours. And so that was one of the main highlights to him, to be honest. So he's actually the most experienced of the 6 submissions that we received. I know there's always a bit of hesitancy going with a new individual, but we've been receiving very good feedback from other transportation engineers in the area, and he came with impeccable records and references.
Good. Any questions through to Andrea then? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Andrea, for bringing this forward. My question to you would be just the timelines that you're looking at, particularly October the 9th. So that will be a busy day for us. Would you have any ideas to how that's going to be, that engagement with council is going to work?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman. Yes, I from what I've been hearing, it does sound like it's a busy day on the 9th. We were envisioning maybe an over lunch, like if we could start at 2 or at noon, sorry, and go till council starts. That would be enough of a time if that worked for all of you.
Okay, so that presents maybe a problem. So we have Councillor Avery and Councillor Chapman. Are you able to accommodate that early of a start, or do we have to put? I think it'd be better to maybe postpone it till after then. Can you go ahead?
What if we added it after council, tack it on instead of before? Does that make it a little bit easier?
Yeah, we're all making a pajama party or something. Yeah.
I think we were just trying to be efficient because you have a daytime activity, might as well check off 2 boxes in one day, but some overtime in the evening, that works too.
I think it's fair to our council colleagues not to encroach upon their work schedule as much as we can, so. All right, so then, any other questions through to Andrea then? All right, Councillor Pauls, and your microphone, please, sir.
We received this report for information.
Thank you. You have a motion by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and then looks like Chief McEwen has changed drastically over time here, but Kelly, please introduce 8.2.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. We're just going to give you a brief overview of our second quarter call volume and activity. Excuse me. As of, if we can go to the next slide, please. So for the months of April, May, and June in the town, for the second quarter, we had a total of 67 calls. 49 of those were medical calls, and for a total of 39.25 hours spent by firefighters on those calls. This slide here shows our second quarter in the county. For 34 calls, 8 of those were medical, and for a total of 44.25 hours. For this year, we've had a total of 101 calls, 57 of those, 56% being medical, which is pretty low percentage of medical calls compared to an average fire department. So we are busy doing a multitude of things, which is good, because I think only medical calls will probably get busier in the future. Our firefighters have spent a total up to this year 611 hours of training and 820.75 hours on calls. You can see in our next slide, we're probably going to be close to our average of last year for call volume. That can change plus or minus pretty easy, but we're kind of right on par where we've been the last couple of years. Code Reds, you can see that this so far this year we're at about 11 as of the end of the second quarter, which is fairly high, and I'm guessing we'll probably surpass 2017's total this year. That's up to the end of the second quarter. That was the total for those years. Yeah, so the 11 is the total for the end of the second quarter. So we're ahead of schedule. And it's not a good way, no. So significantly over the summer, we've had, we were lucky in the spring, we had 14 applicants for new recruits. Out of those, we selected 6 new firefighters. That's a good problem for us to have because very few fire departments, being volunteer, can turn too many applicants away, so we're quite lucky that way. We had 3 structure fires in Coaldale. There was some significant dollar loss, but also some significant value saved, as they were, one of them for sure was a commercial structure, so we did save some stuff there. No injuries or no deaths to report, so that's always good. We had a triple fatality, unfortunately, in the county in May. We've had firefighters go to advanced vehicle extrication in Vulcan, as well as a specialized farm extrication course in Olds over the summer. We've had 5 firefighters take the critical incident stress management course, which is all about mental health and emergency services, so that's of renewed importance to us. We had a pre-build meeting in Appleton, Wisconsin, where we designed our new tower ladder. And I'm happy to report that it's actually been moved onto the floor and they should be starting to build any day now, with a forecasted finish date of January 21st approximately, but I won't hold them to that. We've also had some really good talks with Kate Andrews, and we've done the experimental learning week at the high school for 2 days in May. And that's really the highlights of our second quarter.
Deputy Chief, it's always amazing to receive these reports and all the hard work our volunteer fire department does, and overlaying that with all the training that you do, and it's really a testament to what a wonderful department we have. So you can be proud of the department that you represent today. Is there any questions through to Deputy Chief? Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship, through to Deputy Chief. Appreciate this report, and I appreciate the fact that you're really staying on top of the Code Reds situation, which is an interesting point because I noticed here both in February and April of this year there are 0 both for town calls or so. You know, you would think that they would be a little more consistent, but having 0, does that, and yet your call volume on both those, in both those months for medical are up from the previous months. So I'm not too sure how that's translating.
Councillor Chapman, through the chair, a lot of the times those calls are tracked. Sometimes our medical call volume is directly dependent on what happens in Lethbridge. Being a bedroom community, having our ambulance from Lethbridge from Coaldale getting pulled into Lethbridge on a pretty regular basis, those don't necessarily show up as a code red, simply for the fact is that there is an ambulance available in Lethbridge. So they don't classify that as a code red, so that ambulance will, from Lethbridge, could be a Lethbridge Fire Department ambulance, will make its way to Coaldale, but that does cause a prolonged response time where we're there far before the ambulance, but it doesn't show up necessarily as a code red, but a prolonged response time on Alberta Health's behalf. So we're still doing more calls, and a lot of times those ambulances take longer to get there, but they look at it as long as there's an ambulance available somewhere, then they're okay with that.
Also, is a shift that dialogue to having different expectation, because what you just described isn't acceptable to the residents of Coaldale. You know, it might do well for AHS to say it's acceptable, but for our residents, I don't believe that that's acceptable. And well, I appreciate your vigilance in monitoring that and reporting back to us, and we'll have to be more engaged in making sure that they understand that we're the flexing of an ambulance to Lethbridge still does mean a longer response time, and you know, in our probably definition would constitute a cold red by any other name for Coaldale. So I appreciate the reporting, and you know, please make sure that you communicate through to us if this problem gets worse, and you know, make sure we're well aware of the impacts of this gap in delivery service. Any other questions through the Deputy Chief? Entertain a motion to receive his report for information. Councillor Simpson, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, and then we do have the information items, and I just want to highlight that for 11.5, I've been apprised that our communications people are already involved in the rail safety promotion, and I want to thank Kathy Bly for already starting to engage on that front. Rail safety is important, so thank you very much, and keep up the good work. And I think Councillor Chapman wants to bring forward a little bit of a focus to 11.4.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. As you probably are aware, Highway 3 Twinning Development Association has been doing a lot of work this past spring and summer and trying to move forward because of its crossroads. And so we engaged the services of First Principles and Harry Harker of High River, who's actually formerly a colleague of Spencer Croyle's when they were both in High River. And he put together a really comprehensive strategic plan, which is before you, and has been received by the association. So with that, we're starting to make some presentations to city councils. We made one to City of Lethbridge and one to Medicine Hat already. And so just with that, I'd like to ask for support for a motion here that the strategic plan provided by the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association, which was completed in June of 2018, be received as information and filed, and that be it further resolved that Town Council approve the work of the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association.
By Councillor Chapman. Any questions? So just a question on the second part, whereas is there an ask for a budgetary consideration at this point? I know that there's a fair bit of discussion about dollars there, and it seems a little bit up in the air as to what the final numbers might be. So you're not looking for a specific commitment on an expenditure or a budget allocation at this time, is that right?
At this point, I can't offer you a number, but at the next meeting of the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association, we are going to be exploring that component of the process. So there will be, pending the direction of the association on October the 12th, there will be an outlying budgetary number for each of the member municipalities.
So then that would be a separate ask coming out of there then?
That will be a separate ask. It'll be on a per capita basis.
So what you're presenting today doesn't pin us down to a budgetary commitment at this point?
This strategic plan doesn't in an indirect way does express a budgetary position, but yet in the meantime, this strategic plan outlines for the association what its direction will mean and what the impact will be on on its members. So that's sort of hand in hand, but yet in the meantime, I think this will be the first step, and then move with the second step.
Councillor Simpson?
I'm just curious, do we have a roadmap per se, how exactly it's going to be done? Because I don't really want to make a motion unless I can see exactly how you guys are drawing out this.
Is that a pun on the roadmap?
Yeah.
Well, this is the roadmap for at least the next 2 years, and it's one of those things that the association feels at this point in time that, as it says in the report, either go big or go home, and it's up to the membership to at the end to who will decide how that will look. I think the fact being that the attention that we've received up to date has been phenomenal compared to what's been in the last 10 years even. And so with that, I think that the momentum with the membership, the momentum of engagement with government and other potential partners with industry and commerce will be a big part of this moving forward, so that the engaged partners will try to identify what is best, and that the project be funded and move forward.
But do you have an actual map what the highway would look through Coaldale? Would it stay the same? Would it change?
Yes, absolutely. Alberta Transportation has a master plan, and so really the association is not in a position of taking sides on that master plans. I know that there's been a number of functional planning studies that have been occurring over the past few years, and through those functional planning studies, the government of Alberta is strategizing and identifying the best realignments for its highway. So that being said, for example, in the Crow's Nest Pass, there's been a number of functional planning studies. In fact, there'll be one more coming up in November, which will identify a preferred route through the Crow's Nest Pass that will be acceptable to the citizens, but also to the government of Alberta.
I think, I commend Highway 3 for their work and your leadership as the chair of that committee. And predominantly at this point in time, I think that the group is keyed in on focusing onto the province the importance of a good transportation corridor east-west, and the final details of what the ultimate Highway 3 looks like 20 or 30 years from now is kind of beyond our current day problem. But your group has done a lot of work in advocating the importance of a good, efficient transportation corridor, and I think they have big challenges just twin around fits the Medicine Hat portion and the Crow's Nest Pass portion, and what immediate impacts with regard to design and implementation for Coaldale is a number of years out, unless oil goes to $200 or $300 a barrel and we can get a pipeline to one of the coast, and none of that looks very promising for a while. So I think it's I'm supportive of supporting the efforts of your group in that, and as long as it's clear that at this point in time we're still waiting for the shoe to drop on what the dollar ask would be. Then we'd have to reassess at that point in time, but along with all the other partners. But so, any further questions through the Councillor Chapman? Okay, we have the motion. You have it there. You want to read it again, Bill?
Yeah, I can do that. Be it resolved that the strategic plan provided by the Highway 320 Development Association, completed in June of 2018, be received as information and filed, and be it further resolved that the town council approve the work of the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association.
Kalen?
Just dissecting the discussion a little bit. So it's a two-part motion. One recommendation, if council is not quite ready for part two of the motion, you could have a caveat to the end of it, provided that no dollars are allocated at this time. Just catching the drift, I think that might simplify the intent of the motion.
So would you accept the division of the motion and go with the receive for information question first?
I think that, Your Worship, I think that the two-part question, or the two-part motion there is really to receive the report, but secondly, to approve the work of the Highway 3 Association as a whole, and we're not speaking to budget items here at all. So I think that putting that aside, that the work of the Highway 3 is really, all in intents and purposes, is really to get a project done. That's really the ultimate goal.
Kellen, are you still on deck or no? Okay. All right.
The light's on. Somebody's home. Yeah, through to Councillor Chapman, the intent was that you could, I was just saying that the motion, it is in two parts. You could say it all as one motion, provided that at the second part of that resolution, an additional safeguard could be added, just so it's really clear in the resolution itself that no dollars are being requested. I gather that that's the intent anyway, but you're just adding that in explicitly into the resolution itself. I just offer that as a recommendation if that helped clarify things for the rest.
Okay, well, I believe that this is the very same motion that we presented at City Council in Lethbridge that was received unanimously. So I would certainly try to identify the motion in the same spirit. So that's really the intent of the motion.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. If we keep the motions together, I believe they're asking and we're supporting financially under 1.4, the financial requirements. So if we don't have the notwithstanding in there, I believe I would have to vote against even accepting it as information. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman? When I read through your report, it seemed like there was some, you alluded back to the city and of Lethbridge and Medicine Hat of supporting in principle. They also indicated the reluctance to provide additional financial support. So I kind of hear what this council is saying, and I think it'd be simpler to support the reports, and then just be clear what that we're not committing any financial money at this time. And when you say the work of the Highway 3 committee, I don't, it does seem to weave in the financial requirements are there. So I think we need to be more clear on what that actually means. Would you consider a friendly amendment to the, clarifying that there's no financial ask at this time?
At this time, that's right.
Okay, so that'd be friendly?
Yeah, there is no, there absolutely, there's no request or there's no ask in this motion at all, so, as it stands.
Well, you say the work of Highway 3, so I think just to be helpful for council, it might be, would there be an amendment to the end of that motion as suggested by the CAO? What do you suggest as a possible tag along to part B there, Kellen?
Yeah, I think
What was the wording that you used?
provided that no funding be committed at this time.
Okay. Would that be acceptable?
That there's no funding at this time?
It's your motion, so
Yeah.
if you accept it as friendly or not, that's up to you.
Well, there's no ask here at all in this motion,
Okay.
so.
So
I
just
think that
for clarity,
there's
if
a
we,
difference between, there is a difference between work and between, financial ask. I think that the financial ask will come later, but in the meantime, it's about the work of the Highway 3 Training Development Association.
okay. So then your motion is, the second part again is,
As stated. If you want it separated, we can do that too.
Okay. All right, well, we'll separate the motion. So on the first part, we have a motion to receive for information. Is that right?
Yes, that's what's.
Okay, so on the first question, all in favor? Okay, and then on the second question? Councillor Chapman? So then the second motion would be approve the work of the Highway 3 committee with it understood that work does not.
Well, you can use work or approve the endeavors of the Highway 320. It's I think it's one or two. It'd be like SAWA. It's obviously you're looking for support for the efforts or the endeavors or the work of SAWA would be in the same spirit.
So it's clear in my mind that, Councillor Chapman is not asking for a financial commitment at this time. He's asking in spirit that the Highway 3 keep working as they have and that there'll be a forthcoming proposal on how to fund the association going forward.
That's exactly right. That was the same spirit that was presented to the other member municipalities, including the city of Lethbridge and the city of Medicine Hat, that there was no financial request in those presentations, nor were they in the motions.
Okay, so then we have that motion by Councillor, the second part of the motion. Councillor Lloyd?
Yes, Your Worship. So was there a problem with having the as a friendly amendment? Like, just so that's clear to us, can we have that as an amendment?
What's the amendment you're asking for?
What Kaylin just said about no funding being allotted at this time. I know you're saying it's understood, but we don't really, I think it needs to be stated.
If you'd like it stated, we can say that that Town Council approved the work and endeavors of the Highway 3 Development Association as historically shown, or something to that effect. There's no request for money in here at all, so I don't see I don't understand the situation here.
Well, I think that, council just wants to make it clear for future that there'll be a secondary ask. So.
Can you ask, let's do it this way then, be it resolved that council support the work of the Highway 3 Training Development Association.
Councillor Simpson?
I think that still implies that there could be a financial requirement, as there's financial requirements and fundings in here. So
you're looking for a motion that says without any financial commitment or partnership?
Yes. Yeah.
So it'll be $0 moving forward?
No,
if they come and request the money.
Because we can, that'll go right to the media here, and we can.
It'll just be clear.
It'll certainly just be clear that Town of Coaldale is not going to partner financially.
That's not what's said at all.
All right.
No, the saying is that this motion approves the work plan that you have with regard to actions, and that is understood that the Highway 3 committee will be coming back at a later date with the proposed funding model.
I think in that regard, then I'll just withdraw the second motion. And we'll just leave it that, that we received this strategic plan for information as filed.
Okay. Okay, and then
So
we
the
have,
motion's already carried, so.
Yeah.
Thank
And-
you.
and we have any other information items that council wants to address? A motion to receive the other, Councilor Avery moves the other information items. All in favor? And then a motion to go into closed session. Councilor Simpson, all in favor?